or two more for people to dial in. Okay, thank you everybody for dialing in. This is Dr. Allison Osfed. You're here on the APPIC webinar on applying for postdoctoral training positions. I want to give you a brief overview of what to expect this evening. First of all, we'd like to welcome you and thank you for spending an hour with us this evening to have an important conversation on an important training topic. So thank you for spending your time with us this way. And I'd like to introduce our discussants. We'll be joined by Dr. Wayne Siegel, who is the training director at the Minneapolis VA Medical Center and also the chair of the APPIC Postdoctoral Work Group and a current APPIC board member. And our other discussant will be Dr. Beth McQuaid, who's the training director at the Brown Clinical Psychology Training Consortium. She is also a member of the APPIC Postdoctoral Work Group, as am I. I'm Dr. Allison Osfed, and I am the interim director of training at the American Lake Division of VA Puget Sound, and I'm also a current board member with APPIC. So in terms of our structure tonight, what's going to be happening is we'll be spending about 30 minutes with our discussants reviewing common questions that many people have about the process for applying for a postdoctoral training position. And after they go through that, you will have the opportunity to submit questions. You can certainly type in questions at any time. I and my discussant role will be tracking those questions, but your questions will be answered in the second half, the Q&A portion. So the last 30 minutes of the webinar we'll dedicate to answering the questions that you type in. And everybody will be muted, so we're taking all questions through the chat box, not through discussion. And without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our discussants to kick us off with those FAQs.
Good evening. This is Wayne Siegel. Before we get started with the actual FAQs, I want to talk a little bit about some of the major differences between internship and postdoctoral selection. It'll set kind of a context for what we're going to address later. First of all, with postdoctoral selection, there is no match. For postdocs, APPIC has put out guidelines that are suggested for people to follow, but they're not mandated. Programs are free to follow whatever selection procedures they think fit their program best. We'll be talking more about the guidelines later, and I'm sure you have lots of questions. Another major factor about postdoctoral selection that's different is there's a significant imbalance favoring applicants. Nobody knows how large the imbalance actually is because the actual universe of postdoctoral programs is unknown, and we'll address that in a little bit later as well. The other major factor is for internship, there's a standardized application process. All APPIC member programs using the APPIC directory online, the APPIC, and the match. So it's fairly lockstep in terms of how you're supposed to go through that process. For postdoctoral selection, there is no standardized process. The work group in APPIC and the larger community, we're trying to provide some organization to selection, but it's not a standardized process. Again, programs are free to follow what they want. So we're trying to accomplish this organization through the new Universal Postdoctoral Directory, APPICAS, the online application system, and the selection guidelines. So this is a work in progress. Postdoc programs, again, are free to handle application process they want, but many are adopting kind of what we're suggesting, which we believe will be helpful.
I also want to mention about that, and thank you again, Allison, for that lovely introduction. Just to distinguish that in neuropsychology, actually, there is a national match system. So this is sort of a bit different for folks who are interested in neuropsychology training and furthering that training through a postdoctoral position. So there is a national match system, but at this point, not all programs do participate in that match. Many of the programs that do not participate may actually make offers earlier than the match date. So for different programs you're considering, if you're applying to neuropsychology programs, just make sure that you understand whether or not the program participates in the match, and if they don't, what their timeline is for making offers, so that you can have a sense of how things may play out when you're expecting to hear about positions that you've interviewed for.
So, Beth, why don't you go ahead with this one?
Okay. Often people will wonder about whether or not they need a postdoc and what the difference is between doing a formalized postdoc and finding a position where you can get supervised to track supervised clinical hours for licensure. And really the difference is that a postdoc is to be for advanced or specialized training. So it typically will occur within a program that really has a clear set of training goals, a clear curriculum, and a training plan. Often there are structured seminars and other kinds of experiences that are part of the postdoctoral process. And so it's another step in training towards more advanced specialization in the field. Given that there are increasing numbers of postdocs available, it also may be required in some fields to market yourself for certain kinds of positions.
Second question in this group, do I need to attend an APA accredited postdoc or an APPIC member postdoc? The answer is maybe. There are many other postdocs out there besides accredited and APPIC member postdocs, but quality of a program is an important issue, and most applicants want to attend a program that has high quality. And APPIC accreditation and APPIC membership are marks of that quality. There are quality programs that are not members and accredited, but it's challenging to know which of those are going to be good training experiences and which just may be supervised hours or where you're being used for billable services.
Yeah, I want to add to that before moving on to the next question too, that research postdocs are typically not accredited as well. In terms of specialty training and emphases, often you'll hear these different terms, and you might see that programs are accredited with a specific specialty, such as neuropsychology or child. Other programs may be generally accredited but have emphasis areas. The term specialty refers to recognized specialties, areas of specialization that are recognized by the Council of Specialties. So there are clear education and training guidelines for those recognized specialties. An example is neuropsychology. There are Houston criteria that arise from a conference and very specific guidelines around training that are implemented to be a specialty program. Emphasis areas can resemble, they sort of look like areas of specialization, but they may include other areas of concentration or other areas of focus.
So what are the risks of a reading?
Allison, wait, I'm going to interject. I can't see your screen. I'm not sure if it's just my computer, but just in case, if you want to click the share your screen.
I got it.
Thank you.
Can you see it now?
It might. Okay, our attendees can see the screen.
Yeah, I'm able to see it.
Perfect.
Great. Okay.
Right. Didn't mean to throw you off. Just wanted to make sure
No
it was there
problem.
for.
No, it's important. So what are the risks of arranging your own supervised experience as a postdoc? Such experiences are not part of a formalized training experiences. They're just kind of supervised hours. So there are some providers out there who are just doing it for financial reasons, and they're not that committed to training. Some may be, but it can be hard to know. There are no real assurances in the quality of the overall training and supervision in these type of experiences. It's also worth noting that some licensure boards, such as California, make it more difficult to get licensed without a formal postdoc, sometimes resulting in longer supervised clinical experiences. So the buyer be warned with those type of experiences. And I'm going to address the questions having to do with the Universal Psychology Postdoctoral Directory. So what is the UPPD for short? It's a lot easier to say. So for years, there has been the APPIC directory online, and that's what you as internship applicants last year used to search for APPIC member internship programs. You're very familiar with this. APPIC postdoc members are still in the APPIC directory online, so you can use that directory to search for both internships and postdocs. The problem is APPIC member postdoctoral programs represent only a fraction of the total universe of programs. And so applicants would look in the directory for APPIC, but then they would go to a range of sources. People would advertise postdoctoral programs on different listservs, mail groups. And so there really wasn't one place to go look for programs. So there was a recent postdoctoral training summit, and there was a recommendation to come out of that summit to have one place for applicants to search for programs. There are many advantages over the APPIC directory online in that there are nearly three times as many programs in the directory, in the universal directory now, and there are several unique search fields that are unique to postdoctoral training, so that you can search for specialty emphasis areas and such. So we're very excited about this addition. It's been very successful so far. We expect more and more programs to post their positions. To go on, another question will be, will all postdoc programs be listed in the universal directory? And as I said, the known universe of programs is unknown at this point. We hope the vast majority of programs choose to be listed, but there's no way of telling for sure since we don't know that total universe. It is likely that more research-focused programs may choose not to list in the directory, but we're encouraging them to do so. And small private practice programs that are more supervised hours may choose not to be listed as well too. We're working very hard to try and get people aware of the directory and to list their programs so that they're available for people to search. And that's the advantage of applicants and to those programs. And then several neuropsychology specialty programs have chosen to list their programs in there, but again, not all of them. The next question regarding the universal directory, so how do I access it? So there is a link on the APPIC website that is directly on the front page. A new link was added there just today, so if you haven't looked recently, there is that link there. And then the emails that had gone out for the webinar, and you may have seen many other emails that have come out from me announcing the directory and the webinars and the videos that the APPIC work group has produced. So there are numerous search fields. Some are, as I noted, dissimilar from the APPIC directory for internship that are unique for postdoctoral programs. Within the directory, there is a link at the top with detailed search instructions, so some guidance on how to use the search functions to find programs that you're interested in, because it may not be readily intuitive just by looking at it. So when is the universal directory complete, and how will I know all available listings are there? As I noted, it's a work in progress. We have 3 times as many listings in there now, and that number is growing all the time. There will be a function that will be available soon where you'll be able to find more recently added programs. So if you do a search, you could redo that and then find the programs that are new that you didn't find in the prior search.
I can add a little bit to that. I was just going to say that in reviewing what is listed in the directory, there has been a huge PR effort on the part of APPIC to try to get as many programs as possible in there. And really, it's just been growing and growing, so that's been tremendous. In terms of people who are more interested in research-oriented postdocs, I think that it's more of an issue of lack of awareness at this point because this directory is very new. So two things might be happening if the research postdocs aren't listed there. One is because really they're just not plugged into the whole world of APPIC and the organizational structure that is emerging around postdoctoral positions in the selection process. And the other issue is that research positions emerge over time, people put them together, and they may just all of a sudden have a grant and decide to put together a postdoctoral position without really knowing about that framework. So looking for alternative methods for finding them, such as listservs and direct email, I think is another way to look.
One thing to add to that is there's a large field that's unique to the Universal Directory for programs to describe their research experience. So that can be helpful for people looking for those programs that the program can provide more information. There's also a link at the bottom of the search page. So if you're aware of a program that isn't in the directory, you can email me and let me know about that, and we will work about trying to get them listed. And so kind of a grassroots effort to try and get this as complete as possible. Beth, do you want to start?
Sure. So moving on to the application process, now that we've discussed the search process, a lot of people wonder how many programs is the magic number to apply for in postdocs, and the answer is that we don't really have the same degree of data that we do for internship programs to know what the point is of diminishing returns for a number of applications. So the modal application number tends to be around 8, but this can really vary based on the type of postdoc program, whether or not you're considering geographical restrictions, whether or not you're looking for something that's a very specific specialty experience. So there can be a wide range in terms of the number of programs you apply to. It's not quite as, we don't have quite as much data as we do at the internship level for that.
And then also, what is the timeline for the application process? When is program information available? When are applications due? When are interviews? Since there's no formal structure to postdoctoral selection, this varies by program. However, for most programs that have more of a clinical focus to their training, it's recommended that applicants start searching in early fall, and we're right in the middle of that now. The deadlines for applications tend to fall in December or January. Interviews typically occur in late January and February. And although not all programs will adhere to APPIC's guidelines, the selection guidelines, the date programs are asked to make offers is February 27th, 2017. And again, this can be variable for research positions depending upon the source of the funding. Again, programs really differ in their application process. Highly recommended that you look at their website, their public materials in terms of their timeframes and how to apply.
People sometimes wonder how this process will work or have concerns about it, how it will work if they are more of a scientist practitioner or clinical scientist and they are really considering a range of different postdoc programs that include both research, predominantly research focused and predominantly clinically focused with a research component. There's no great answer to this question. There may be some conflicts in timelines because predominantly research programs really may not be as aware of the uniform notification date. They are not required necessarily to adhere to that. they may be trying to fill their positions from a range of different disciplines, not necessarily even psychology. Um, so really the best advice I think is to be really frank about what you're doing and what your interest is in the different programs. Find out what the timeline is for making offers. It is very reasonable to ask that question. A lot of the clinically oriented programs will be explicit about whether or not they're following the uniform notification date of February 27th. But other programs will be able to give you a sense of how many people they're interviewing, how long they're interviewing, and when they're likely to know about making offers, so that you can, at least for yourself, know how this might play out over time.
So what should I be aware of if I'm applying to a postdoctoral program at the same site as my internship? Ideally, your internship or the postdoctoral training director will talk to you about this so that you can find out if there's preference given for internal applicants, how consideration for internal applicants may affect timeframes. Be aware, if you're applying within the same institution, be aware that you may be competing with your classmates who are also likely your internship support network. You should also be aware that as an internal applicant, there's the possibility that you would not be selected and that you'd be faced with completing 6 more months of your internship knowing that you weren't selected, and people tend to have some feelings or emotions about that. Many internship programs also have postdoc programs, and interns often apply, so it's not an unusual process, but it's recommended to kind of be aware of these issues so that you're informed as you go through that.
So our last question on this slide is how this would work for people who are considering applying to both 2-year neuropsychology and non-neuropsychology clinical postdocs. I'm sort of assuming that might be a small proportion of people, but for those who are, I think that it's important to be aware of the differing timelines. So again, keep in mind that there are neuropsychology programs that are outside of the match. They will be making, they could be making offers as early as January or early February. Then there are neuropsychology programs that if you enter into the match, it's binding, and that match date is in mid-February, and it's available on the APPIC website, APPCN. And then the uniform notification date is on the 27th of February. So there are a couple of different timelines there. If you are interviewing to kind of get a sense of really where you want to focus, I think it's just important to be aware that your opportunities could emerge and require an answer along different timeframes.
What kind of application materials do postdoctoral programs request? Again, programs differ because they can request what they want. With internship in the APPIC, it's standardized and no supplemental materials really are supposed to be requested. But most postdoctoral programs, there is some commonalities. They often request a vita, some form of your transcripts, a letter of interest or an essay, letters of recommendation. Some may require work samples that are de-identified. It's very important to check with the program, their website, their public materials about how to apply and what is requested. Highly recommend that people develop a spreadsheet, and with many of these variables about deadlines, what's required from what program, so that you can keep it all straight, because it's quite different from program to program.
Wayne, do you want to answer the next question about the APPICAS?
Yes. When do I need to use APPICAS, which is the centralized postdoctoral application system that has been sponsored by APPIC? So not all programs use this application process, and not all APPIC member programs use that. The APPICAS program is available for programs to use it if they want to. Again, you want to check in the Universal Directory and the program's public materials about applying and what they want, how they want you to go through that application process, and whether APPICAS is part of that process. You can also check chances are some of the programs that you're applying to are using APPIC, and you can check within the portal. The programs that are using it are listed in that portal as well. A note with APPIC is you need to complete the base application in order to see the programs that are listed. And I also want to point out APPIC is very different and not quite as detailed as the APPI. It's simpler to fill out. There's just some very basic information, and then there may be some unique variables or letters or things that individual programs want.
Wayne, this is Allison. Do you want to check and see that the slides are matching where you guys are at in the discussion?
Got it.
Okay, so often people will wonder about having a phone or Skype interview if you're in an area that's far from where you might be interviewing. And in general, I think there's been a movement towards having greater understanding of the financial hardships posed by asking people to do in-person interviews at the postdoc level. Everyone understands that there was often a lot of airline transport for internship interviews. People have relocated themselves in many instances. And so it is really more accepted to do phone and Skype interviews for postdoc positions, and it's really often you can see on the website if that's something that's offered, and if it's not obvious, it is really okay to ask about it.
So next we're going to talk about the postdoctoral selection guidelines. So how do I know if a program is following the APPIC postdoc selection guidelines or not? If the program is listed and in the Universal Directory, there is a field dedicated where the program will indicate if it's following the guidelines or not. If it's not listed or it's a program that's not in the directory, you can contact the training director and ask them because you do need to know kind of their selection process when they're going to be making decisions. So that information should be available for most programs.
Sometimes you might be interviewing at a place and you'll find out that they are unaware of the selection guidelines, and then there are other times that they will say that they are not following the selection guidelines. So really programs can choose whether or not they follow the guidelines. At this point, you know, they're being strongly encouraged, but it's really up to the purview of the program. If the notification date is earlier than the guidelines, or they think that they will be making decisions earlier, you could ask how long they might allow applicants to hold offers if you are interviewing other places that are adhering to the guidelines. The VA has agreed that all of its programs will follow these guidelines, and also the APA Division 54, which is the Pediatric Child Divisions, Division 53, are publicizing a list, an ongoing list of all the programs in child areas that have indicated their intention to follow the guidelines, and those are available on the Division 54 website.
So what if some of your programs you're applying to are following the guidelines and some aren't? There's really no simple or easy answer to this. For programs that are making offers before the suggested date, you could ask them how long they'll allow applicants to hold offers. It would be helpful to have a clear ranking system of programs so that you know your preference as offers are made to you, and don't wait until the 27th to have that ranking list because offers could come in early. So you know what is your top program, what's not your top program. And it's critically important to get mentorship through the process. So often internship training directors will provide this as applicants or their interns are getting offers. They will help coach them through that process and advise them what to do with early offers and how to communicate with programs, because it can get to be a little bit complicated.
So the guidelines currently suggest if you're thinking about how long you can hold an offer, so let's say, you know, your number 2 ranked place is giving you an offer, or 3, and you're thinking about it, or you're trying to make a decision. The guidelines currently suggest that programs give you at least 24 hours to hold the offer, but it's not inappropriate to ask for longer. It might be the best strategy to ask the program how long you could hold an offer, but programs could say no. They have a number of people waiting after you to find out where they stand, and they need to be able to make decisions as well. So I think be prepared that the 24-hour could be a minimum. It might be useful if you're in a situation like that where you need to hold an offer because of a personal circumstance, that you explain in brief what that is. And know that holding offers, which is especially after the recommended notification deadline into the days afterward, does place a burden on the program and on other applicants waiting for positions, because the program may lose other applicants, and other applicants may lose their opportunity for positions.
If you don't accept an offer right away, will the program view you negatively if you wind up at that site? The answer would hopefully be no, but it does depend. Some programs may perceive that in a particular way. My recommendation would be to be transparent with the program. If you need to hold an offer, to explain why that you need to hold an offer, and just be open with them through the process. And most people, we think, would be understanding.
So just to give a little bit of an explanation about reciprocal offers. So what happens if you get an offer from one program, done your interviews, you've done your rankings, and your number 2 program gives you an offer, and you don't know what's happening with your number 1 program, and it's before February 27th. So essentially, there are programs that can make you an offer at any time if they're not following the guidelines. So if number 2 calls you and makes you that offer, you can contact your top-ranked program that is adhering to the guidelines and request a reciprocal offer. So the idea behind that is that the program that is adhering to the guidelines then gets the opportunity, if you're the top-ranked person, to make you the offer, and you have the opportunity to accept that. If you do get a legitimate offer from a less preferred program and they won't let you hold the offer, you really should only contact your top-ranked program and ask them for a reciprocal offer. Now, you could be number 2 on their list, but they're not going to be able to give it to you unless you're their top-ranked person. This might be appropriate to contact them regardless of whether or not your top-ranked program is following the guidelines. So it is okay at that point, if they say they're not in a position to give you an offer yet, to ask what their timeline is if they're not following the guidelines, and to ask where you stand with them to get a sense of how this may play out over time.
So what if you request a reciprocal offer from your top-ranked program and the program offers you the position? Should you do? You should take it, because you've said you're contacting them because they're the top-ranked program. You should not request a reciprocal offer unless you're planning on taking it if offered. So just be warned about that. Also, programs may alter or expedite their process to respond to your request, and will accept acceptance in response. So it kind of clogs up the system. So you have to be clear about what it is that you're asking for and what it is that you're going to do.
So if you do request a reciprocal offer, it's permissible so let's say, again, the scenario, your second-ranked place has offered you a position, and you're going to call your top-ranked place and ask them for a reciprocal offer. It is permissible for them to ask you for evidence of that offer, and that could just be an email from the training director at your number 2 ranked place indicating that you have that offer. Some places will simply take your word for it. Other places may request some kind of written documentation. So if you do get an offer and you think you may be in that situation and the offer is by phone, it may make sense to request to have an email, have it written out to you in email so you have that evidence.
If you don't have an offer on February 27th, what should you do? Don't panic. As you recall, there are significantly more postdoctoral positions than applicants, so there'll be many good positions available. The time frame for advertising and postdoctoral positions is much more variable. Actually, new positions very possibly will become available. On the 28th of February, the UPPD will allow programs to indicate what positions are unfilled, and then applicants can search by that very easily and find what positions are available. And so many good positions are obtained after that date.
Yes, I want to just underscore that before we move on to the next question. Do not panic. They're going back to the fact that this is actually a situation where the market is in your favor. And many postdoc positions emerge on an ongoing basis. So it's not the same thing as the internship selection process in terms of any kind of imbalance. So don't panic. And continue to look and be on the market and check things out.
Wonderful. I want to thank our fabulous discussants. We have a number of strong questions coming in for you all, and in the interest of time, I'm going to share some of those with you. The first question is a general question. And we had someone ask about career paths that would be better or more beneficial to pursue specialized postdoctoral training in psychology versus areas in psychology where that would be less important.
Well, I mean, I think I can answer that question to some extent. I think that, there are certain fields that are recognized specialties now. And so within, for example, neuropsychology, it's increasingly sort of expected that you'll be doing a postdoctoral fellowship in neuropsychology for 2 years prior to entering the workforce. But in many other specialties, such as even in the child area, specialization is not necessary for board certification. So it really kind of depends on also what your career path is, and if there's something very specific you want to be doing and you need that specialty training to be prepared for that, then that's another thing to consider as well.
Great, thank you, Beth. Another question, Wayne, if you want to field this one, is what are the benefits to an APA accredited postdoctoral experience versus one that's not, especially with regard to boarding down the line?
Well, the biggest mark or the biggest benefit of doing an accredited program is that program has been thoroughly reviewed and site visited. So you can be assured that it's a quality training program. The purpose of the program is about training. It's not about creating revenue for the staff that are working there. So it's really the highest mark of quality. In terms of boarding, and I assume the question is pertaining to ABEP boarding.
Yes.
I do not believe that ABEP requires an accredited program for any of the specialty boards, but what they often require is the specialty boards is that postdoctoral training experience follow the education and training guidelines of the specialty. And again, as we mentioned before, the specialty would be like neuropsychology, it may be health psychology, it could be forensics or rehab. And they will have clear guidelines about what that postdoctoral training should be like, and that's what boarding typically requires.
And you mentioned vetting in your response, Wayne. I'll turn this over to you, Beth. Can you speak to the vetting or quality assurance involved with listing for programs in the UPPD? In other words, is the UPPD listing similar to APPIC membership or APA accreditation?
So at this point, the UPPD is very new, and the postdoctoral working group really created it with an agenda of attempting to consolidate all the available postdoctoral opportunities that are out there. And so there is not a vetting process at this point to be listed in the UPPD. It's not the case that you have to be APA accredited. It's not the case that you have to be an APPIC member at this point. So this is a very, very broad categorization. And again, it was created to try to really harness as much information as possible about the opportunities. And that's where we are at this point with that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Wayne.
Yeah, there is no vetting process, so programs are free to list in the directory. If they're not APPIC members or accredited, talk to people, your advisor, internship director, faculty that you work with in your doc program or internship, whether they're familiar with that particular program or not. And if nobody's aware of it, doesn't mean it's a bad program, but be warned and do what you can to kind of find out, is it a good experience for you?
Speaking of vetting, another question is about the pros and cons to applying or completing a postdoc in a private practice setting that's not a formal educational program.
Well, I mean, I can mention a few things, and Wayne, if you want to elaborate, but in general, I think you need to be cautious about whether or not there's anything, any real training component to that experience, or whether or not really the only training that you're getting is some amount of supervision for providing clinical service hours. There are private practices that do have a training emphasis, but I think you would be wise to be cautious and evaluate whether or not there's any structure to the training, what amount of supervision is available, whether or not there are any experiences beyond supervision that really would serve in the purpose of furthering your own competencies.
And Wayne, I have some APPICAS questions for you.
Sure.
So one is, please speak to the fees related to using the APPICAS. Another one is the process of submitting your official transcripts via the APPICAS.
So fees, it is the same as with the APPI for internships. So the first application, and not to fill out your profile, that first application is when you say you want to send it and apply to a particular program. That first fee is $25, and then everyone after that is $15. So it's the same as with the APPI. People have reactions to there being fees, but with APPICAS, you only have to submit one transcript. Many postdoctoral programs will require original transcripts, and then it's going to cost you $25 to $40, $50 per application to get that transcript. You only have to do that once with APPICAS. So roughly, not in every case, but roughly it's kind of cost neutral. And so that seemed to feel okay to do. In terms of submitting your transcript, there are instructions within the portal about how to do that. There have been some questions that some doctoral programs will not submit a transcript to a PO box. In that case, if you just contact APPICAS support, they will give you their address where it can be mailed directly, and they'll deal with it from that point forward.
Thanks, Wayne. Another question is about letter writers, and do you have recommendations about best letter writers, especially for people who are applying to a combination of research and clinical positions? Who should their letters come from?
I think about, letters as a place to really, find somebody who's going to write a terrific letter, but also avoid any kind of red flags. Because you have to understand that the most letters are outstanding. And so I think what you want to do is have someone who represents the different facets of the kind of postdoctoral position that you're applying for. Typically, somebody will recommend someone from your graduate program, someone from your internship program, someone who's familiar with your research if you're applying for a research postdoc, somebody who's a clinical supervisor if you're applying for a postdoc. The other kind of red flag I would avoid is no letters from your internship or no letters from your graduate school, because people will be sort of looking for that range, and if there isn't a single letter from where you are now, that might raise a question. So think about a range and think about representing your strengths in a way that will showcase that you're a good fit for the kind of position you're applying for.
One thing that I wanted to add with letters and APPIC. So one of the big differences between the APPI for internship and APPIC is APPIC requires that separate letters be uploaded for every program that you're applying to, whereas with internship, your letter writers could upload that letter just once. The reason is letter writers may want to tailor their letters to the sites that you're applying to because they may be different. Sites may request specific types of letters, and so we wanted to provide the flexibility for people to do that. So people have been confused about that when they've gone through the letter process in APPIC. But it's for the applicant's benefit so that letters can be tailored.
Would one of you speak to handling applying for jobs at the same time as applying for postdoctoral training positions and how to balance that and or communicate about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I mean, I think that the same thing is true for jobs as it is for programs that are not adhering to the guidelines or for neuropsych programs that are not participating in the match. You just need to be aware that the timeline can be very different and it may not line up with when you need the information. Given that circumstance, I do think that programs are thoughtful about trying to be understanding if you are applying to an array of positions. They may or may not be able to be flexible if you need more or less time because you're waiting to hear about a job. But they certainly are not, I don't think there's any downside to sharing the fact that you have applied for positions as well as applied for postdocs. But as Wayne was saying earlier, I think that's got to go into your spreadsheet of the timeline, and timelines for job offers can be very wide and somewhat unpredictable. So,
what would you recommend for people who have not defended their dissertation yet and perhaps they have a dissertation defense tentatively set for some time after the uniform notification date?
That's not unusual. Many postdoctoral programs require the dissertation to be defended, or they may phrase it, all requirements for the degree be completed prior to the start of the postdoctoral program. If somebody's defending earlier in the year, even if it's after the suggested date, I don't think that's a big deal. Programs get nervous when the defense is pushed much later in the summer, right before the postdoc, because if something goes wrong, then there's really no time to kind of deal with that. So I think it's not uncommon for people to have not defended by that date, and I don't think that it hurts applicants. Having said that, I think that it is an advantage to have defended, and programs will see that and notice it.
I'm sorry, just very quickly wanted to add to that. There are programs that will not and cannot let you start until you are done.
Yes.
So, for example, if you are, starting an APA accredited program that requires you to have everything completed, they really cannot let you begin. And you cannot be appointed on a research training grant as a postdoctoral fellow unless you have fulfilled all those requirements.
How important is supervision experience on internship to obtaining a postdoctoral position? So, experience providing supervision.
I would say it may be an advantage if you've had some of that experience, but it is certainly not a critical factor. Most postdoctoral programs want people coming in with kind of sound core clinical skills and research skills, depending on the focus of the program. And they may offer supervision and training and supervision through that postdoctoral program. So I don't think it affects decision that much if someone's not had that experience.
And Wayne, this one goes to you too. Is there a standardized reference form in the APPIC for letters of recommendation?
There is not. This piggybacks on what I was saying before, is postdoctoral programs often want letters tailored to their site, so there is no standardized process. The letter writers are free to write what they want. You may request of your letter writers that certain types of letters be written, or the program may require certain elements. And so they can be tailored, but there is no standardized form.
And there are a number of people who have asked questions about couples who are looking for postdoctoral placements in the same geographic region. Is there a couples match equivalent at the postdoctoral level, or do you have other recommendations for managing that?
There really is no, since there isn't technically a match, there really isn't an equivalent of the going in together as a couple. I would say that that's a circumstance where, if you someone makes you an offer and you need to hold it for 24 hours, or if you're requesting more time because your partner is trying to find out what they're, or is waiting to hear on their situation, that you be as open as you can about that. I mean, I do think that programs can't really bend all that much, but they can try to be understanding if there's a way for them to bend. And we understand this is your life, and so I really think being as open as you can about that and straightforward about your situation is to your advantage. But there is no real analog.
I would add that if you are accepting a position and you are hoping that your partner or significant other gets something in that geographic region, but they don't, reneging on that acceptance is usually not seen as very favorable, and it may follow you in a way that's not the best for your career. And so, but my advice would be is do not accept a position unless you're truly committed to keeping it. Now, if there really are like super major complicating life events, programs may understand if you need to renege on accepting a position, but it really needs to be unusual.
That's actually a question that was just raised, Wayne, which is that is it good form to decline a previously accepted postdoctoral position for a job?
I would say it's seen in bad form, and many programs may see it as not terribly ethical behavior.
And then this speaks to setting and experiences. So for someone who's, say, on internship and practicum experience trained outside the VA, and then they would like to pursue postdoctoral training in the VA, should they pursue that, or is it sort of a lost cause as someone who's coming outside of the VA trying to get in, or other similar settings?
I guess I'll take that one. I think all VAs are a little different on how they may perceive this, so I can speak to, I guess, my program and my awareness of other VA programs. Is I don't think that it hurts you. Most academic health centers, medical centers, they want the best trained individuals. And so if somebody's gotten good training somewhere else and then they want to come work within the VA, I think the VA would be very open to that. So I don't know that it necessarily hurts you. Having some of that experience could be a little bit of an advantage, but if you went to another really strong program and got good training, I don't see it as hurting you in a significant way.
I agree. I mean, I think that if you have done related training in a content area that's highly relevant, trauma or recovery or substance abuse, but you haven't had the opportunity yet to be in a VA system, I think, but you make the case that you're very interested in that, I think that's very appealing to programs.
Right. Let me add one thing to that I think that is important is, so what I'm often looking for in an applicant is not that they train in a VA, but they know how to function in a large complex medical center too. And so if they've been in another environment where they've worked in that complex setting, then I'm more comfortable with them working in my setting.
And Beth, this one's for you. If you're applying to a research-focused postdoc, does that mean you should have an extensive research track record and experience beforehand in order to be competitive?
Um, I'm going to say it depends. I will say that, there are applicants for research-focused postdocs that are coming in looking like that. So, it may be to your disadvantage if you don't have a lot of publications yet, or you haven't had that much research experience. But that being said, I know that there are some circumstances where people get really turned on to research at a later time in their training. And, if you can make that case and there's a program that is a good fit content-wise for you, you might be considered for that because it is a training experience after all. So it's kind of a it depends answer, but I think it sort of does.
How much flexibility is there in terms of negotiation at the postdoc level around issues like salary and start date?
Would say,
Um,
go ahead, Beth.
I was just going to say, virtually none around salary. In many cases, those salaries are set. In some cases, they're federally set. So it's not the same as negotiating for a job. As for start dates, programs will state in their application materials if they have a very specific start date, and some do, or if there's a range of time for when postdocs may be able to start. So there are some that can begin in July or August, and there's a little bit more flexibility there. There's some that have like a hard start, you know, first business day in September. But usually programs will be open about that, and you can just look on their websites and find out.
How does family leave work in a postdoctoral training setting or environment?
It would vary significantly by setting. So there's no common answer that I could give you how that would work. The VA has one policy, and all other facilities are going to handle it a little bit different. Going to an accredited or a postdoc or an APPIC member postdoc program, they're probably going to try and be some assurances that they're going to make some efforts to accommodate. But again, there is no standardization to that.
I want to add one thing to that, or maybe two. Often postdocs really will require you to complete an entire calendar year. So your question would be, if you're taking a leave, how does that work? And will they extend that calendar year at the end date of your postdoc? And some places might consider doing that. It does vary. The other thing I want to mention, though, is for certain research fellowships, such as T32 fellowships, there's a payback obligation. So if you're in a position for 1 year, and then there's a second year that you are in that position, that second year serves as payback for the first. So basically that's structured to make sure that you complete, that you use your research training from your first year somewhere beyond. So if you don't complete a full second research year and then you go into a clinical position, that could be problematic for you as well. That's very specific to research training grants.
How is it seen if you apply to multiple tracks within one larger postdoctoral training program?
I can try that one. I don't think that it is a negative or frowned upon as long as you can make an argument within your materials about how each of those tracks fit your career goals. If you're just applying because you want to be at that geographic location or that facility, then that may not look so good. So really you need to make it kind of fit with kind of what your trajectory is for your career.
I
Do,
agree.
do you two, we're just about out of time, but finally, do you two have any recommendations about licensure and where to best find information about what licensure requirements there might be around postdoctoral training experiences in states where people might want to practice and be licensed?
I think the most important thing is to have the long view and to think about where you want to be living ultimately. And for that, the state licensing boards, typically through their Department of Health or Department of Professional Regulation, have information about the licensing requirements that are publicly available. So you can, if you know you want to live in California or Virginia, find out what those requirements are and take a look at whether or not the experiences you're considering will align with those.
Right. The Association of State and Provincial Boards of Psychology, ASPPB.org, is a great resource, and they serve all the licensure boards for the states and Canadian provinces, and they have summaries of the licensure regs and links to the original documents. So it's really a good resource. But like what Beth said, thinking about where you want to live can be helpful. The states differ significantly on what is required from state to state.
Thank you, Wayne and Beth. We are over our time marker at this point. I want to thank our audience and everybody for dialing in. This concludes the webinar on the postdoctoral application and selection process. We hope that it's been helpful for you. Please note that a recording of this and our other webinars will be available on the APPIC Postdoc webpage in the next week or so. Also on that same webpage, you can find the newly posted YouTube videos. There's a 3-part series on the postdoc application and selection process. And we will be collating these frequently asked questions and putting the questions as well as brief responses onto that webpage as soon as we conclude the 4th of our 4 webinars. Finally, we'd just like to say we wish you all the best of luck during this upcoming postdoctoral application and selection season. It's going to be great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.